Hey, today I'm going to talk about election fraud and what can be done about it. You know, there's an awful lot of talk about election fraud recently, the 2022 elections that have just transpired, but especially in the 2020 election for the president. I'm going to talk about the presence of election fraud. I'm going to talk about whether or not there was sufficient evidence to show that the election outcome was changed due to fraud, and I'm going to talk about what could be done about it. To begin with, I'll just preface the whole thing by saying there isn't sufficient evidence to prove that the election was changed, that the outcome was changed. There are lots of individual instances showing fraud in various forms, but taken by themselves, they really don't prove anything. They just sort of create an appearance of impropriety. And if you think about it, isn't that what's important? The appearance? I mean, yes, the actual count's important, but it's even more important that people believe in the election. One, if they don't believe in the election, they won't vote. And two, even if they do vote, they won't trust the candidates that were elected. It's a deal breaker for any democratic system. I'm going to show you some statistical evidence, and I'm going to show you some anecdotal evidence. And then after that, I think you'll be able to get a general idea of where I'm coming from. Let's start with some statistics here. Here's a little chart to give you an idea of what's going on. There were consistently a lot of really key districts which had more people vote than there were registered voters. And I'll show you right here. Okay. In Nevada, for instance, there were 1,277,000 registered voters in the jurisdiction, but there were 1,593,143 who actually voted. That's 125% turnout. And then go through here. In Pennsylvania, there was 109% turnout. In Minnesota, 107. North Carolina, 106. Wisconsin, 105. Michigan, 105. Arizona, 101. And in Georgia, it wasn't quite 100%. It was 96%. But that's still a phenomenally high number. And no one who sees this could deny, honestly, that causes you to look twice a little bit. You know, it warrants a further investigation. It may be innocent. It may be just some snafus in record keeping. It might be, but come on, people. You need this. It rates an investigation further. Now let's start with some anecdotes. Consistently, you were seeing election monitors being screened out of the polling stations, being prohibited from monitoring the counting of the votes. And I'll show you some examples here. Here are some poll watchers in Philadelphia being excluded.
You're not letting me in? Well, what? That's why I told you, call the police. Do it. If you legal, call the cops. I have a citywide watcher certificate.
It's not for this location.
It's not for it. It is not. Is this a city?
Okay, there you go. Let me show you some more here. Scroll down and show you some more. Let's see. Here's some Trump challengers being ejected from ballot canvassing in Detroit. He's saying all the Republicans get out of the room. He openly said it. Okay, let's see here. Let's head on down. Oh, here's a goodie. Look here, they were putting up barriers to prevent people from being able to see into where the votes were being counted. I mean, it's right here, folks. Look at that. Now, why would they do that? Why? Here's a fellow who was prohibited from entering the counting center, even though he had a court order to allow him to get in. They defied a court order, which of course would be illegal. It's contempt of court. But, you know, they don't care. I mean, and really, why obey the law when you can get away with breaking it? Then there was a matter of Sharpies being given to people to fill out their ballots. Well, I mean, anyone involved knows that the Sharpies, if they're used, will invalidate the ballot and the machine won't read it. Now, let's listen to what this woman has to say.
By the poll workers.
Yes.
It did not read their ballot,
Okay.
and they flooded in there twice. I used a pen,
Yep.
took their Sharpie and threw it away.
And it read your ballot.
And it read my ballot.
And it read your ballot.
And it read my
So
ballot.
what they're doing is they're telling people to use the Sharpies. That way,
Yes.
those votes aren't counted.
Yes.
That's exactly what's happening.
Yes.
So there was other people that were in there voting with their pens, and they literally went around and they were yanking pens out of their hands.
Yes, they tried to do that to me, and I took their Sharpie and I hid it because then they said...
They even yanked pens out of the people's hands and gave them Sharpies.
They had a bowl of pens behind them that they were not giving to people and only giving Sharpies out.
There we go. So the ones with the Sharpies are not being read at all.
No.
No.
Okay, and then here's another video. Showing people marking Sharpies with Sharpies. Here's one of some suspicious ballot collecting in California.
Are you guys collecting ballots? I thought they collected them all. I just want to document. How much? Wait, but how come they already called the state?
Because these are mail-in ballots.
Are there a ton in there?
Yeah.
All right. Are you collecting from a lot of places?
She said that the ballots had already been collected, and yet there they are with big bundles. How do we know they didn't just bring the bundles?
Are you guys official election guys? All right. And let me just ask you one thing. Where do you guys take them?
Election center. That's it.
Is that in the government building?
Delaware County.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there a lot more in there?
Okay, we'll stop there and go on to another. Here's a video by Project Veritas showing postal workers backdating ballots so that they'll be accepted even though they came in after the deadline. Here we go.
Tell us where you work.
I work in the Traverse City Post Office, more specifically, Barlow Branch.
Your boss told you and your colleagues something that shocked you this morning. What was it?
We were issued a directive this morning to collect any ballots we find in mailboxes, collection boxes, just outgoing mail in general, separate them at the end of the day so that they could hand stamp them with the previous day's date. Today is November 4th, for clarification.
Who is your boss? And what is his title?
Jonathan would be a direct supervisor, yes. As of right now, he is the opening supervisor for the Barlow Branch Post Office. So and this is anecdotal, Carrier down in another office said they watched the postmaster doing it. If it were just a typical day, it would be clerks doing it up at the distribution center.
So 8 p.m. election day, November 3rd. The Court of Appeals ruled ballots have to be received by that time. And what were you told?
To separate them today so they could mark them with yesterday's date and send them through the express system to wherever they needed to go.
This appears to be an attempt to circumvent Michigan law and allow late votes. And you said there was a hamper where letter carriers were supposed to leave their ballots. Where are the ballots now?
They were putting them into express bags to go to the distribution center. In regards to a hamper, there was a standard hamper that all letter mail is supposed to go to, and they had a tub next to it that we were supposed to put any ballots collected today into.
Yes. What made you come forward?
That's sketchy. Like sketchy, it screams corruption. Also knowing the post office's leanings politically, it didn't seem quite right.
What is your message to other postal workers who see things like this?
Report it. How are we supposed to have any integrity in this country if we are just going to let things slide based on a scaling issue?
Are you afraid of retaliation against you?
I've had whistleblower policies backfire on me in the past, so yes.
We'll have to reach out to Jonathan Clark for comment. Hey, is this Jonathan?
Yes.
Hey, I'm a reporter with Project Veritas.
He looks like the kind of guy I'd really trust with my daughter alone.
That you guys have been stamping ballots with the previous date, November 3rd. He just hung up.
Oh, he just hung up. Gee, I wonder why. All right, well, there we go. Okay, here's a voting official actually filling out ballots. Oh, gee, move along. Nothing to see here, folks. Oh, and here's a goodie. Watch this one.
Yeah.
This guy's going to be burning a bunch of ballots.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
Oh, you got to do what you got to do.
Fuck Trump. Got around 80.
That's 80 ballots. Now, by itself, is that a whole lot? No, but this, I mean, the guy's doing it right out in the open. If he's doing that, you got to know that other people are doing the same thing. But Roro, that could be innocent. Oh, yeah, I'm sure. There's a reason for it. Quite legitimate. Okay, now does this prove that the election was decided by fraud? No, it doesn't. These are all individual instances, and they can't prove that an entire election was swayed by them, because there's always election fraud, always, some. But it does create an appearance of impropriety that should warrant an investigation, shouldn't it, don't you think? I mean, if people don't trust the elections, how can we know anything is right or true? You know, I mean, with the Republicans, for instance, I always hear them complaining about what they call rhinos continually getting reelected over and over again and expressing opinions that contravene those of their constituents. And people say, well, they keep getting elected. Well, how do we know they keep getting elected? Huh? What's needed is a real investigation, one that people will trust. Now, they were going to do that at the certification of the Electoral College votes. They were going to request a 10-day investigation on all of this, but guess what? There was the riot, and there is buku evidence to suggest that that riot was staged. So they staged the riot, assuming they did, they staged the riot, which prevented the 10-day investigation, which would have established one way or another whether the election was on the up and up. Plus, on a personal note, you know, I have some personal experience with election fraud. The first time I ever voted, I was 4 years old. You know, there were multiple allegations of underage people voting in this last election. When I voted, I was 4. I went to the polling station in Allen, Oklahoma. I had just turned 4. My grandmother was carrying me on her hip. We went through a line, and they handed me a ballot. We went over, and they didn't have booths. We all had to vote out in the open. And there were guys walking all around, pardon me, looking to see how people were voting. My grandmother said, "Vote for the rooster," which at that time there were still a lot of illiterate people, and the rooster was the symbol of the Democratic Party in Oklahoma back then. So I went through, I voted a straight Democrat ticket, and I voted for Lyndon Johnson over Barry Goldwater in 1964. Oh, and by the way, there were rampant charges of election fraud in that one too. What's going to happen if this problem isn't solved? Eventually, it's all going to blow up, and people, heaven forbid, might start voting with bullets. Don't think it can't happen, because it can. Look what's going on in Brazil right now. They've had to call the army up because there was such fraud. Also, it's been established that the social networks like Twitter and Facebook have been working actually with the government to censor their opposition. That's illegal, folks. That alone right there is election fraud. And it's happening, it has been happening all over the place. Everybody knew that it was happening. Now, with Musk taking over Twitter, he's definitively shown that it was. The 3-letter agencies actually had a backdoor portal known to the management of Twitter in which they actually entered the website and took down tweets, changed tweets, and did no end of other chicanery to influence the election. So as I said, what can be done about it? Could it really be changed at this point? Practically no. We're all stuck with it. However, this sort of thing has to be corrected. There needs to be investigations of this sort of thing, because without confidence in the elections, there can't be any democratic process. Anyway, thanks. I hope you learned something, and I hope I presented it properly. Peace.